Hi everyone, welcome to another review. It's been a while since I've published a review, but this one promises to be a very exciting one because in this review I will pit my favorite headphones, and I do think these are some of the best headphones in the world. So I have for comparison today the Abyss AB-1266 5TC. I'll just let you have a closer look. It is a marvel in so many ways. I'll be comparing the Abyss directly with the Hifiman Susvara. The Susvaras have long been my favorite headphones, and because I bought the Susvaras before I bought the Abyss, and I've been enamored with them, and I've loved these headphones for several months. But I finally have the 1266 5TC to compare the Susvaras with, and I've been listening to them critically for pleasure for months now, for days now, and and I feel now I can make some solid opinions or pass some solid opinions on how they compare. And as far as sort of honorary mentions go, I also want to talk a little bit about the Raal SR1a, which is also a phenomenal headphone, and many people sort of consider this in the same league as the Susvara and the Abyss, and with very good reason. So first of all, I'll sort of break down this review in terms of aesthetics, feel, and comfort, which is going to be part one, and then I'm going to talk about tonality, and I'm going to talk about the technical performance. So in terms of aesthetics, build, and comfort, I've always really enjoyed the aesthetics, build, and comfort of the Hifiman Susvaras. I do think they are Hifiman's halo product. I mean, Hifiman has run into a lot of controversy regarding its build quality and all that, but I've personally been a fan of Hifiman because I found their customer service to be very good. And Susvaras are the halo products, so these are supposedly better built than most Hifiman products are, and it shows. So they're uniquely built. So this sort of cup shape, very sort of roundish, they're very large and very comfortable. And the brushed metal looks nice with the wood lining, at least to my eyes. And these are very comfortable cups. And this is how they look once you wear them. And I think that they look fairly fine. They look fine. And they're very comfortable. It's very ideal for wearing long hours. And I've worn the Susvaras for 8 to 9 hours on some days. So wonderfully comfortable headphones, good build quality. Mine came with the 3-year warranty, so that puts my mind at ease in terms of build quality and all that. Another interesting thing is you have 24 karat gold on the drivers, and because gold is supposed to be a wonderful conductor. And in any case, so these look nice. They look iconic. They look unlike any other Hifiman headphone. They have a lot of family resemblances to other Hifiman headphones with this sort of strap and the metal band. But I think they look nicer than the AB-1000SEs and the AB-1000V1s and V2s, or the Aria for that matter. In terms of aesthetics, build, and comfort, the Abyss are more polarizing, I think, aesthetically speaking. When I first saw the Abyss, I sort of promised myself that I'd never get these headphones. But of course, I ate my words. And now I've come to a point when I think the aesthetics grow on you. And over time, I just love the aesthetics. This is me personally, my subjective opinion. But when these headphones hang from my stand, I love how they look. I just love how they look. You know what I mean? They look unique. They look iconic. They look daring, bold, etc. And there's this very visceral quality, very physical quality to these headphones, which really works with the kind of music they produce. And I'll of course get into the music production, music presentation of these headphones later. But aesthetically, I love them. But it's going to be more polarizing. In terms of build quality, I think a lot of you might have seen videos of Abyss running Jeeps over the headphones. So they are sturdy. They're super sturdy. They're made of aluminum. I think in terms of build quality, I would give it to the TC. I'll call this 1266 5TC TC in short, for the sake of brevity. So in terms of aesthetics, I think for me it's a tie. In terms of build quality, I'll give it to the TC. And comfort-wise, I find them quite comfortable. So they're heavier than the Hifiman Susvaras. I think if memory serves me right, they're about 100 grams lighter than the LCD4. So they're supposed to be very heavy, but you're not going to feel it for whatever reason. I mean, the weight distribution is fantastic. So this is what it looks like. And you can, of course, adjust the pads and how wide or how closely the headphones fit your ears using this sort of system. I have a huge head, as might be evident, but I like the way it fits me. I get the bass that I want. I'm not going to get into the Raal right away. I'm going to sort of bring the Raal later. But like I said, so in terms of aesthetics, feel, and comfort, I think the TC wins. In terms of tonality or tuning, which is the frequency response, The Susvaras have a more traditional frequency response, I think. What that means is I think the Susvaras are more neutral. A lot of people say that the TC is neutral, but I don't think the TC is neutral. The TC is somewhat V-shaped. Maybe V-shape is too strong an expression, maybe U-shape is a better expression or more appropriate expression, but in whatever the case might be, whatever terminologies you want to sort of express the FR of the TC with, the Susvaras are more neutral, they're more akin, are more, they resemble or they sort of follow the Harman 2018 curve more closely. So in terms of bass, Susvaras have a nice bass shelf. You're going to get some rumble, sub-bass rumble. There's a subsonic quality to the bass, so you'll feel the bass as well. But overall, it's a sweet bass. It's not the sort of earth-shattering sort of, a bass that hits you hard in the back of your head. That's not the Susvaras, but it's decent, very good quality bass, fast, snappy bass. And no one will have a problem with the bass, unless, of course, you compare the bass with the TC's bass. TC's bass is, I think, the best I've heard on a headphone. It is amazing. Now, I've heard other headphones that do bass differently. For example, the Focal headphones, I think, have an interesting way of doing the bass decay, which basically means that I feel, on some tracks, I find the Focal Clear or the Utopia's bass somewhat more textured than the TC's bass. But what the TC's bass lacks in that sort of regard, because it is a planar magnetic sort of bass, so to speak, and I do think planars and dynamic drivers do bass differently. But it does make up in terms of the sheer bass quantity and impact. And once you get used to this quantity of bass, you're not going to go back. Like, if you maybe between the Utopia or the Clear and the TC, the Focal headphones sound bass light. I'm not kidding, they do. Everything sounds bass light in comparison to the TC, with the perhaps exception of the LCD4, but I'll get into that comparison a little later. In terms of the mid-range, I think what you find is that the Hifiman mid-range is a little more forward compared to Susvara mid-range, a little more forward compared to the TC mid-range. The TC mid-range is slightly recessed. So what that means is, let's say on some tracks, not on all tracks though, on some tracks, for example, if the vocalist is positioned sort of at the back, like let's say for instance, I like to listen to a lot of Bruce Dickinson, the former vocalist of Iron Maiden. I find that on the TC, the vocals can sound very, very recessed, and in some cases it's dry. However, the Susvara is just amazing with vocals. It's got a very liquid mid-range, and I think liquid is the best word to describe Susvara. And other expressions that come to mind when I think of Susvara are things like musical, natural, analog, and like I said, liquid. So the mid-range is the star of the show with the Susvaras. And I do think the Susvara has a better mid-range, but the TC has a far better bass. I'll get into technicalities later, which I think also matter. But to finish up a discussion on tonality in terms of treble, I think they both do treble interestingly well. Very different takes on treble. I think the treble can be slightly more etched with the TC, but it's also more detailed, but I'll get into that later. And the treble is more relaxed with the Susvaras. It's not necessarily like a rolled off treble. And there are people who have paired the Susvara with bright sounding amps, and I've said the Susvara can be a tad bright, but it's not. It is a very relaxing headphone. It's not bright, but it does take on the sort of properties of whatever source gear you pair this with whatever source that I've paired it with, which has been several kinds of speaker amplifiers and headphone amplifiers, all the way from the Topic A90 to the GSX Mini to the Past Labs amps, a preamp setup, to the Accuphase E380, which currently drive Susvaras, which is a marvelous Japanese amplifier. The Susvaras, I think, are neutral, and the treble is magnificent. It just walks the line between resolving and analytical while being musical and non-fatiguing beautifully. It's just an incredible balance with the Susvara treble. The TC has a very interesting treble. I'm not going to say that Susvara is a better treble than the TC, because the TC treble is also very lively, energetic, and in some ways it works better in certain genres of music. And that's sort of going to be what I differentiate these two headphones with by the end of the review. Now, to get into technical performance, the short answer is I think the TC is a more technically capable headphone. I didn't reach this conclusion right away. If you can look up my Hifiman Susvara review on HeadFi, and what you find is that I call it the king of headphones, and I call it the best headphone on the planet, and I have compared the Susvara with the TC in that review. However, I'm going to take back some of the things I said in that review, because I hadn't owned the TC at that point. I had long editions of the TC when I had done the review, but now I've had long listening experience with both headphones, and I think the TC is technically superior to the Susvara. It's slightly more detailed. The Susvara is more detailed in the mid-range though. That's worth keeping in mind, because when you switch back and forth, you do pick up more mid-range detail with the Susvara that you do not with the TC. The TC's bass is more detailed. The TC is a faster headphone. So moving on from detail, in terms of speed and dynamics, the TC is unparalleled. It's faster than any headphone I've heard, and I include the Stax headphones. I've heard the Stax a couple of years ago, but on some tracks that I've heard the Stax with, I just don't recall the Stax being as fast. I'm going by memory here, of course, but the speed here is just phenomenal. It's just unreal. The slam, the dynamics is unreal. It slams harder than the LCD4 ones. It's amped right. Quick motor amping. These are harder to drive headphones than usual headphones. So you might want to have like a very powerful amplifier to drive this. I use a speaker amplifier to drive both because planars do take to high current. And in my experience, AP headphone amplifiers of the highest range with speaker amplifiers, I've seen better performance bang and better bang for the buck also with speaker amplifiers. Now, yeah, so in terms of dynamic, this is the most dynamic headphone I've heard. As a matter of fact, if I had to use one word to describe the TC, the word would be dynamic. If I had to use one word to describe the Susvara, the word would be musical. Now, in terms of other technical traits that matter, for example, soundstage and imaging, again, the TC I think beats the Susvara. The soundstage of the Susvaras are great. They're not Hifiman, they're not a Sennheiser HD800 level soundstage, so they're not extremely wide. But neither is this. But what these headphones do is that they're very holographic soundstage on both cases. Like on both cases, if you hear live music or live concert, for instance, you're going to feel like it's your own personal concert around your head. It's a wonderful feeling. It's very spacious and airy, and they're both out of the head. But the soundstage of the TC is slightly better, and the imaging I think is slightly better. Susvara is also phenomenal when it comes to imaging and very distinct images, very clear, very sharp. Amazing. Hifiman does imaging very well, but I do think the TC just it's just slightly better for imaging because it's just crazy how clear the images and how distinct images are. And once you AB from the Susvara to the TC on a lot of tracks, you're just going to get a clear image, and I think that's what's made the TC a lot of fun for me to own. Finally, to talk about timbre, the Susvara has better timbre. It's more natural timbre. It doesn't have any planar sort of traits. It's not the sort of plasticky timbre that a lot of planars display. The TC has a slightly metallic timbre, slightly more industrial feel. Like even vocals on some tracks don't sound as natural as it does on the Susvaras. So, and this is why when I first heard these two and I compared, I thought the Susvara was a far better headphone. What I hadn't done is I hadn't tried heavy metal music with the TC, and I'll tell you why. So I grew up as a heavy metal fan, a metalhead, whatever, but I sort of, graduated, or I sort of, my tastes evolved into more sort of things like indie rock, classical jazz, which is why when I got the Susvara, I was like, this is it. There's no better headphone on the planet. But after buying the TC, I've been going back to my old heavy metal and rock roots, and boy, has it been amazing. And as a matter of fact, I think like heavy metal doesn't get its due credit in some ways, I think, because I think a lot of us highbrow audiophiles sort of, pick the more highbrow genres of music. And it does well with other genres, but when it comes to rock and metal, if you've heard heavy metal and rock on the TC, you're not going to want to hear any other headphone ever. Because the bass, the slam, the impact, the soundstage, the imaging, the precision of the imaging, and overall like the sharpness, the bite of the electric guitar, the riffs, the energy behind riffs, everything is just on a different level with the TC, right? Which is not to say the TC doesn't do well with other genres. So especially if you have genres where the vocalist has a very natural timbre to his or her voice, it's going to go really well with the TC. Where the TC falters is like if you have instruments or tracks or bands that don't sound very natural or organic. Let's say, for instance, there is this industrial rock band that I tend to like. It's called Stabbing Westward. And they tend to use a lot of synthesizers. So these synths don't sound as natural on the TC as they do on the Susvaras, for instance. A lot of vocalists, for example, a lot of female vocals will sound really good on the TC because they have that sort of sweetness inherent in the TC. So you might want to see the TC as something that subtracts the sweetness that's inherent in tracks, whereas Susvara does enhance the sweetness. So what you end up choosing is up to you, really. I do prefer the TC with rock. I love the TC with live music of all kinds, though. But for more indie and vocal-based music, I like Susvaras. And at the end of the day, I do think while the TC is more technically proficient, it's very difficult to say which one is better. And I would sort of, although it's a slightly more expensive headphone, I want to say that they're equally good headphones, and they're headphones for different use cases, and they're different enough that you can justify owning both if you want to do something crazy like that. So I just want to end this review with a few words about this very special headphone, the Raal SR1a. And I've been on the Head5 forums for months now, on the Susvara forum and on the TC forum, and I've been sharing opinions, reviews. And because a lot of people recommend buying the SR1a, and some people say that it's more technically proficient than either of these two headphones, I just had to give it a shot. And so far, I've been, enamored with this. I've loved the SR1a. I think it's more resolving than either the Susvara or the TC. Some people go as far as to say that once you've heard the SR1a and you go back to the Susvara or the TC, they sound veiled. Slight overstatement, but these are more resolving. And the clarity of the images and the clarity of the entire presentation, when you listen to any kind of track with the SR1a, is phenomenal. So they sound natural, they sound clear, they're resolving, they don't slam as hard, of course. The bass can be slightly wanting. It's not really poor bass. I want to sort of say that it's slightly better bass than the HD800S. So that gives you a sense. It's not like a weak or it's not a non-existent bass, and the bass does take to EQ. So I have heard a lot of rock tracks with this that I've liked because of the speed. But overall, if you want to buy the SR1a, it's much cheaper than the Susvaras, it's much cheaper than the TC. It's roughly $3,000. I would also recommend you checking out the SR1a, and they're not uncomfortable. And of course, the magic trick beyond the resolution is their soundstage and imaging. Do I look funny? I love how they look, for instance. I get used to it. I think even when headphones came out, they might have shocked people with what they look like, right? So all of this is acquired taste. I love how they look. I keep the flaps open because I get very sort of in front of me sort of imaging, and very comfortable, as you can imagine. No clamp pressure, no nothing, very light, highly resolving, wide open soundstage, way wider than the HD800. So this is the soundstage kings. These are the soundstage kings. Slam can be a bit wanting, but of course this pairs really well with certain kinds of tracks. More of a flavor headphone, but I do still think that these two are the best headphones in the world right now, barring of course things like the HE1 or the Shangri-La. But I do think these headphones are far, well, to my tastes, are more preferable to the Stax headphones, including the 009S. That's it. That's all I have for the review. I haven't, spent as much time with the TC as I have with Susvara's, but I've been listening to the TC for hours every day ever since I bought it. It is burnt in. It's I've given it its sort of due burn-in time period, and overall, I want to say that these two headphones are equally good. And of course, go and listen to both and see which one you like. And if you can't afford to have both, of course, I would highly recommend having both. That's it. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for future reviews.